Good afternoon and welcome once again to the Angry Astronaut. So, time to start delving into something a bit controversial. I have never reported on something like this before. That is to say, I've never reported on anything UFO related, UAP, whatever you want to call it, that didn't involve some kind of tangible evidence aside from the testimony of somebody involved in the whole UFO investigation community. Even though some of the testimonies that we may have heard from people who claim to have seen crashed UFOs while they worked with the government, who claim to have worked with alien technology, etc., are legion. These sorts of reports have been coming out for decades. It's difficult to give these sorts of things a great deal of credence unless you have some tangible evidence to go along with it. However, recently, a federal whistleblower, somebody who is actually working on the recent government UAP project, made an announcement that has frankly stunned the scientific community. Most people are not reporting on this at all. However, some, such as my colleague John Michael Gaudier, somebody on YouTube that I trust very much, somebody who only reports on things that have some credence to them, he reported on it recently, and I feel that I should as well. And here's the reason. This person has been thoroughly vetted. This is somebody who was working on the UAP project very recently and somebody who has very little reason to lie. As a matter of fact, he has lots and lots of professional reasons as to why he shouldn't lie. He also has a fantastic reputation with his colleagues. It's very difficult to imagine that this is somebody who has lost his mind, somebody who's exaggerating. Not to say that people who have reported these things in the past have lost their mind either, but this is definitely, by far, the most credible witness we have ever encountered who testifies right now that the government, not only the United States government, but governments around the world have recovered crashed UFOs over the last several decades. UFOs that actually seem to have originated from a number of different locations and were built by different species. How do we know that this person is telling the truth? How do we know we can trust what this guy has to say? Well, because it happens to be coming out at the same time that NASA and the Pentagon are admitting that they have found evidence of strange spherical UFOs, strange spherical craft now all over the world. Craft that have been detected not only by visual means, but also by a number of other instruments as well. All of this evidence combined, in my opinion, gives strong indication, the strongest that we have ever had, that we are not alone in the universe and that whoever is out there is paying us a visit at this very moment. Recently, NASA and the Pentagon clip taken from an ABC News chopper that was reporting on a major fire taking place in Northern California appears to show a very similar spherical object heading straight for the fire at a high velocity. Very interesting to see just how similar this object is, at least from first appearances, to the spherical objects that were filmed in the Middle East and apparently in many other locations as well. Now, we do have experimental spherical aircraft right now that are capable of hovering, capable of moving around, utilizing gas thrusters, that sort of thing, that don't seem to produce any sort of heat trace, very similar to these objects. However, none of these experimental aircraft are capable of achieving near the types of velocities that we've been seeing from these types of craft in the past. And while this particular object could be be some kind of balloon heading straight for the fire because the fire would be sucking in oxygen at a rapid rate and therefore driving up the wind speeds at this altitude. That doesn't explain the other objects and how they seem to travel in a very similar manner and with a similar velocity to this object that was filmed on the West Coast. So what exactly are these things? What sort of qualities, what sort of details do we know about them? Well, surprisingly, we know quite a bit, and that's because the Pentagon has observed these things utilizing more than a single type of observational instrument. They seem to travel between 10 to 30,000 feet, at least the ones that we have observed. They are either white, silver, or translucent, and 1 to 4 meters in size. And here's the important thing. They are anywhere from stationary to Mach 2 as far as their velocity is concerned. None of our spherical experimental aircraft can achieve anywhere near these kinds of speeds. Supersonic speeds with a spherical craft is simply beyond our current technological capability, at least as far as we know. And if China had achieved something like this, then why attract our attention with slow, lumbering observation balloons at the same time? That would simply encourage us to watch the skies a lot more closely and possibly detect their spherical experimental reconnaissance craft at the same time. It seems very unlikely that China could possibly produce a supersonic spherical vehicle that's capable of maneuvering at high speeds. Now, none of these craft seem to be doing anything that defies the laws of physics. All of them seem to be traveling in a manner that's consistent with solidly established aerodynamic principles. However, that being the case, it is very difficult to explain a spherical object that could possibly achieve supersonic speeds without conventional engines that would produce some kind of heat signature. And thus far, these vehicles seem to produce no kind of noticeable heat signature. That being said, though, there is a new type of next-generation propulsion that NASA actually is reviewing right now that could explain how these things maneuver without any sort of visible type of engine. I'm going to get to that in just a moment, but let's get on to this whistleblower and what he has to say and why I'm taking him seriously. This is David Charles Grush, age 36, a decorated former combat officer in Afghanistan. And by the way, I'm going to be quoting extensively from an article in The Debrief. Very interested in how detailed this article is and how thoroughly supported it is. In any event, this fellow is a veteran of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, or the NGA, and the National Reconnaissance Office. He served as the Reconnaissance Office's representative to the UAP Task Force from 2019 until 2021, and then from late 2021 until July of 2022, he was the NGA's co-lead for UAP analysis and its representative to the task force, somebody who has been directly researching UAPs with the Pentagon just a year ago. And many of his colleagues, such as Carl E. Nell, who's a recently retired Army colonel and current aerospace executive who was the Army's liaison for the UAP task force from 2021 to 2022, well, he worked with Grush and he characterizes him as being beyond reproach, and he's not the only one who believes that Grush is telling the truth. So what has Grush done? Well, apparently he's given Congress and the intelligence community inspector general extensive classified information about a covert program that retrieved intact and partially intact craft of non-human origin. Let me say that again. Intact and partially intact craft of non-human origin. He says that this information has been illegally withheld from Congress, and he recently filed a complaint alleging that he suffered illegal retaliation for his confidential disclosures. And according to Christopher Mellon, who's a researcher with Avi Loeb's Galileo project, Grusch is not the only one saying these kinds of things. According to Mellon, in a recent article in Politico, he said the following, quote, "Since the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO, was established, I have referred 4 witnesses to them who claim to have knowledge of a secret U.S. government program involving the analysis and exploitation of materials recovered from off-world craft. Other sources who, rightly or wrongly, do not trust AARO's leadership have also contacted me with additional details and information about an alleged secret U.S. government reverse engineering program. Some have supplied information to the Intelligence Community's Inspector General, others directly to staff of the Congressional Oversight Committees." Now, by the way, the Pentagon is categorically denying all of these claims, but are they doing it because it isn't true, or because they are simply trying to control the release of information in order to avoid a panic? Because, after all, if elected officials were to become suddenly aware of the fact that alien craft are flying through our skies and have been doing so for decades, they could also pass initiatives requiring military aircraft to engage these UAPs and possibly try to force them down if they don't comply with our instructions. Yeah, an initiative like that might make absolutely no sense and would be an act of sheer idiocy, but how many times has Congress passed initiatives like that in the past? It could also lead to a general policy of U.S. fighter aircraft maintaining combat air patrol over the entire country, trying to track these things down and engage them wherever possible. Once these orders are sent out by Congress, they cannot be questioned, they cannot be disobeyed, and the potential for some sort of unwanted and devastating interplanetary incident could become almost unavoidable if this sort of thing were to happen. That's a very good reason to keep this sort of thing under wraps. That being the case, though, Mr. Mellon does point out that eventually the public is going to become aware of all of this. For example, in March of 1950, dozens of UAPs flew over Farmington, New Mexico in broad daylight. In 1952, in the month of July, UAPs allegedly flew over Washington, D.C. on successive weekends. And then there was the night of the UFOs in Brazil in 1986, where 3 UFOs were spotted by hundreds of witnesses hovering over the airport near Sao Paulo. And then there was the infamous Phoenix Lights event in 1997, when thousands of witnesses in Phoenix, Arizona spotted what appeared to be numerous V-shaped UFOs flying through the night skies. They were enormous, many, many times larger than our largest stealth bombers, moving silently and rather frighteningly over the city. However, the cameras in 1997, at least the ones accessible to the average citizen, were not good enough to show just how amazing these things allegedly were. That is not going to be the case if something like this occurs over a major US city again. Today's smartphone cameras are so good and their night finding equipment so effective that if a Phoenix Lights event were to take place today, the evidence would be irrefutable, and mass panic might very well take place immediately thereafter. Far better to release this information in a controlled fashion very quickly before something like this occurs again. And in my opinion, this evidence is starting to become absolutely overwhelming. And incidentally, if you asked me 2 years ago if I believed in UFOs, I actually would have told you no, although I did believe at the time that Oumuamua was probably an extraterrestrial object of some kind. UFOs and the story surrounding those seem very suspect to me. Not so anymore. And the information that Grusch has been presenting recently is about to blow the lid off of this whole thing. Grusch said, quote, "We are not talking about prosaic origins or identities. The material includes intact and partially intact vehicles," unquote. And by the way, he is represented by a lawyer who served as the original Intelligence Community Inspector General. This is not some random random individual of questionable background or questionable education looking for his 15 minutes of fame. This is the real thing, or at least I think so, and we're about to find out a lot more very soon. But how are these craft actually being propelled? By some mysterious force that we don't understand? Not even remotely. Although some people have talked about warp drive and things like that explaining their movements, it can also be explained by a principle that's currently in front of NASA right now. A principle that manipulates the magnetic fields of our own planet and the magnetic fields of the solar system and the universe. If you can generate an artificial magnetosphere, something that we have the capability of doing today with our superconductor technology, you can use the magnetic field of the Earth, Sun, Jupiter, or anything else that has a magnetic field in order to maneuver. Indeed, you could actually use the Earth's magnetic field to repel yourself into orbit if you had good enough superconductors. We're talking about 20 times as efficient as the superconductors we have right now. Again, this is a proposal in front of NASA now. A proposal involving a craft that generates its own artificial magnetosphere to reach Jupiter in the space of only 3 weeks. Something that I give a lot more information on in a video that I have linked at the end of this one. So we're not talking about propulsion methods that are far beyond our comprehension or violate the laws of physics, just something a little bit ahead of our current technology. So what sort of origin might these craft have had? What sort of civilization can we imagine might have constructed something like this and sent it here to spy on us, to explore our planet, or perhaps just came here by accident? Are there any theories that kind of go hand in hand with the evidence? Well, as a matter of fact, there is. And if you'd like to see an episode about this, I'd just like to know that this episode is popular and something that you guys are enjoying. Therefore, once this video hits 4,000 likes, I will release a follow-up chapter to this episode explaining and detailing a theoretical civilization that might have produced these strange spherical craft, and this will go in conjunction with all of the astronomical evidence that we've detected over the last few years. This is something you want to see. Please like this video. The more likes I get, the more views I'm going to get, and the more it's going to help my channel. So thanks very much for watching. Please like, please subscribe, and as always, stay angry about space.